I just felt like my job was getting in the way of my progress. So,
welcome back, passive investor, to another episode of the Passive Income Adventures, where we have Don Spafford today of Happy Camper Capital. They invest in campgrounds, fun stuff, RV parks, and they usually have higher returns than other types of real estate. So Don is going to take us from his story. When he and I met just a couple of years ago, he was a new investor and he reached out to me after a podcast episode. And this is what I'm always saying. We want you to reach out to us afterwards. So Don basically had been referred to me at one point and didn't call. And then he heard me on a podcast. And he thought, why didn't I call her? I should have. And so he reached out to me. And then after that, started reaching out to pretty much everybody who caught his interest on a podcast. And they would give him resources, free advice, investing opportunities. It didn't really matter. Everybody had something to offer. And from that, he put together an amazing networking group and eventually went full-time as a capital raiser for Happy Camper and was able to recently quit his job. And so he goes through the story. It's very similar to our story, where we have just a couple of like low white collar workers with some stay-at-home moms, and basically taking about 5 years to work our way from just getting by maybe slightly better than paycheck to paycheck and going to being actually retired on our passive income, or at least partially retired, being self-employed for the other part of the income. It's an amazing story, and it shows that anybody can do this with some determination and some willingness to get outside of the box a little bit. Now, you don't have to become a full-time entrepreneur like Don did. If you have some cash that's left over from your job, if you're able to live below your means, then just get out there and start investing. You set yourself a good goal, 3, 5, maybe 10 years, depending on your timeline and your income and your ability to live below your income, and you will see amazing results just like Don did. So enjoy the story. I appreciate you spending your time with us today. I know it's going to be worth it. Hey, Don, thanks for being with us today. We have Don Spafford of Idaho Falls, Idaho. I know you didn't know that Idaho Falls was in Idaho. I had to say both of them. Don Spafford with us today. He's with Happy Camper Capital, and they specialize in campgrounds, RV parks, and boat marinas. And it's just an awesome opportunity to have you with me, Don. We've known each other for, I don't know, a couple of years now, and we met each other through the real estate space, and we've really been almost mirroring each other's passive income journeys along the way. I hear you just recently left your W-2.
that's correct. Yeah, I did.
Hey, is it a congratulations?
Yes, it was my decision.
Awesome. Yeah, it's so cool. We left ours as well, but we got anticipated a little bit by a layoff. And so everybody was like telling us, oh, so sorry, so sorry. I'm like, no, congratulations. This is a congratulations kind of thing. Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to just hearing a little bit more about your story. I know we've talked plenty on the phone. We've met in person, sat down and talked about the story. And I just want to hear it directly from you. Tell me about your background, how you started out down this entrepreneurial investing road, and bring us up to the present day where you're finally like, you know what, I'm leaving my job.
Sure. Say from a very young age, I've always had an interest in numbers and money, I guess, finance, even going back to a small child playing Monopoly. By the time I became a teenager, I started working at 14 years old. I got a job working at the Dairy Queen, making a whopping $3.25 an hour. And at that point, though, I had this interest in investing, not potentially real estate. I was more interested in following stocks because that's, I guess, what was more normal.
Me too.
And so at that time, this was somewhat pre-internet. And so I would look at the newspapers every day for stock prices, just following that kind of stuff. And then, so I guess I set on the path to work in that space more, become a financial advisor, a wealth manager, what do you want to call it, portfolio manager. And so that was my education. I graduated in 2008 with a degree in finance, banking, investment science, and portfolio management, and accounting. And the plan was to go down that route. But that was pretty much the worst time you could graduate with that type of a degree, is all the businesses were going out of business, laying people off. The market crash of 2008 was a huge effect and impact on all that stuff. I came out of it a bit disappointed. The path that I had planned for, even the company I worked for, was going to create a hybrid position for me, which would be part-time portfolio management along with something else. And when this all was happening, and the company was laying people off as well, they didn't really feel that it was right to create a position that wasn't needed while they were laying people off. And I had to take a back seat, and I never got quite back into that position again. And so as things moved along, my family was growing. Our expenses, of course, were growing with that. And my income was not growing to keep up with that to that level. Therefore, our debt was growing. We got to the point we had to put grocery purchases on the credit card and things. We weren't, like, say, living a life of luxury by any means. I didn't drive new fancy cars or have like nice new fancy clothes and those kind of things. It was just normal living expenses like the average person has to deal with. Medical bills and taking care of your kids' clothing, school expenses, and all those kind of things. So these things just kept piling on and getting worse and worse, really. And so eventually, at some point, to my wife, as our children were growing and getting out of the house, going into school, my wife was now still at home, but now wanted to have something to do with her day. But there has been a stay-at-home mom. It was our plan to have her raise our kids. rather than just have her work to pay for her daycare. By the time our kids were all in school, she wanted something to do, but we needed her to be flexible, to be available when the kids are sick or even during summer, to get not to worry about daycare and things like that. And somehow the idea came up from me for her to go into real estate, to become a realtor. As she investigated it, she decided she liked it. She liked helping people and giving a chance to talk to people, and of course having flexible hours to work when and where you want. So she got her license around 2011, I think, maybe 12. Around was our fourth child was born, and so she, of course, she would now be taking this baby while she's doing house showings and things, but she enjoyed it. And so some of her very first clients were investors. One of them in particular was a friend of ours who was an attorney he got a line of credit on his business and was buying properties in cash. At this time, we lived in Omaha, Nebraska, and he was buying these properties in cash and essentially doing the BRRRR process, which I think we all know today: buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. He was fixing these properties up and then renting them out and refinancing them later, which I thought was just mind-blowing when I heard about it. It's like, I didn't know you could do something like that, and I would have loved to have gotten involved, but I did not have access to cash like that or resources to do that. I was just, let me figure out how I can do this. So I had the mindset, as most people I think do, that real estate is for the ultra wealthy, and the average guy, you can't play in that space. I assumed I needed to have a bunch of money and be wealthy or have some kind of line of credit or something to do that. As I later got educated, read some books, and realized that's not true, that the average guy can do it. I got motivated to want to figure out how and make that happen. I still did not have pretty much any savings at all. I still had a lot of debt, so I still wasn't sure quite yet how I was going to do this, but I knew that it could be done. And later on, we eventually moved to Idaho. And once we got here, we again got settled in, took some time, and then I got back into it, wanted to figure out how I can invest in real estate. During this time, I was now working from home for that company still. And so I had a lot of time during the day, and I went to an event and discovered Bigger Pockets. So I got in Bigger Pockets at the end of 2016, started listening to the podcast. While I'd be working from home, I put on the podcast and just listened to those all day long. I got more educated and motivated from that, read more books. And that's really what pushed me and got me motivated to buy my first property. So I found, and again, just from networking and reading on the forums and stuff, I found out some creative financing options that you can take a loan from your 401k, which I didn't ever think about before. So that's what I ended up doing to buy that first property. I could loan from my 401k. And I found a local lender that does a 10% down payment option instead of 25% down. So that's what really allowed me to buy that first property, which I bought was a four-plex. And that's kind of what got that ball rolling and got me more and more involved in real estate. I knew from the very beginning that the cash flow from that one by itself would not be enough to do much of anything. I could have, went and said, I'm going to go, we need to replace our car. Let's go buy a car and use the cash flow to pay for that car. But no, I was not going to do that yet. I wanted that cash flow to build up and recycle to buy more properties and keep building that to get to the point where I eventually could have enough cash flow to then pay for those types of luxuries and things. So that was my goal. And one of the things that I did from the very beginning was also, I was not active on social media. You couldn't find me I was on LinkedIn, I guess, but I wasn't active at all. I had an account, that's about it. But I became more active on Bigger Pockets at that time. And I would listen to podcasts and I would start reaching out to the guests that were speaking. At the end, they always have their contact information. I'd reach out to many of them. And that's eventually how I got connected to you, Emma. So it was a coincidence we can get into, actually. As I was trying to get more into bigger stuff, apartment buildings and commercial real estate very early on, I somehow got connected to somebody else who actually sent me your information and said, hey, you should talk to Emma. She's looking to get into that space. This is way before, maybe a year before you were on Bigger Pockets. And at the time, though, I still had some limiting beliefs. I'm like, who am I? I've got nothing to offer. I'm a nobody. And then again, a year later when you're on that podcast, and I was like, hey, wait a second, that name sounds familiar. And you're in Salt Lake. So I looked it up and was like, dang it. And then it made me feel bad for not reaching out sooner. But of course, at that point, I'm like, hey, Emma introduced me to you a long time ago, or to the podcast. I'd love to talk to you. And of course, that's how we at that point got connected and started getting to know each other and working together as well. So it's a long path, but it's just one of those things that I was motivated and driven to find a way to create additional income to help get us out of debt, mainly, and get to the point where I could have the income streams without having to work more hours.
Yeah, I remember that first phone call that we had. We had that building in Arkansas, and you were investing in the same area, and you were talking to me about a project that you were working on, and I asked you if you needed any help on it or what you were looking for. And you said, oh, no, that one's already done. And I said, well, how were you able to buy that? It was a larger commercial property, like some land, I think it was. And I asked you what your process was for that. And you said, I called a couple of guys and we put the money together and we bought it. I just remember sitting back and thinking, okay, this guy can raise money right there, because the way you said it was so nonchalant. I thought he just called a couple guys and put together a couple $100,000 to go and buy this large project. And I don't think you at the time realized what a big deal that was, because a lot of people really hate raising capital. And at the time, I just remember thinking like, you don't run into people like that very often, who really like raising capital, who are good at raising capital, who just don't really think it's that hard. And I know that now in looking forward where you are now versus where you were then, you recognize like raising capital is a full-time job and all of that. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I just remember being really impressed. Like, I don't know if he realizes what he just said there and what he just did, because that is how you know where you fit in. And that is how you know what niche you should be in, is when you're doing something that other people are terrified of, intimidated by, and are not good at. But then for you, you're like, I just called a couple of guys and we got it put together and we took care of it.
Yeah, well, it wasn't quite that simple, I don't think. But yeah, I was, and to deal with clarification, I was definitely terrified, right? I'm still very much considered an introvert.
Yep.
It's not my normal space to just reach out and talk to strangers and do that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was one of those things that I was motivated enough. I had this property under contract, so now I had to find a way to get it closed. So I just reached out to everybody I could, which is a very limited network at that time, just many through bigger pockets, and trying to find who would be interested in getting involved with me in this. And luckily it worked out, and we were able to do that, and then did it again on another JV deal I did right after that. But I guess I never at that time considered that really raising capital, because I was more of just finding partners, I guess that's the way I considered it. I guess the same, but a bit different. But yeah, I always appreciated you having that support and encouraging me, saying that, hey, you're good at this, keep going at it. And so that really gave me some motivation, I guess, hearing that from you, that, okay, maybe I can do this. I don't know. And surprising, when I actually did start officially raising capital, I did honestly better than I thought I would the first attempt, and I've done quite a bit more since then. I'm, I guess, myself quite impressed with what I've done, but I know I'm still small peanuts compared to some guys that raise hundreds of millions every year, but maybe we'll get there someday.
It's like a fine art of delicately balancing what you've accomplished and being proud of what you've accomplished, and also having some people who are better at it than you, so that you have some goals to look forward to, and being able to say, hey, I've come a long way, and being excited about the way that you still have to go. I'm in the same boat. In fact, our journey mirrors each other in a lot of ways. You've definitely surpassed me as far as raising capital, because I don't actually really like it. And I find it to be very challenging. And my way of raising capital is putting out programs like this, getting on social media, whatever it is, and then having people call me. And if nobody calls me, I'm not raising any capital. And so where you're a little bit different, you figured out, take us where you were then when you first realized, like, hey, I could actually do this and do this in a big way, to where you are today. And you got to that point where you're willing to pick up the phone, find great projects, and match those projects up with investors.
I wouldn't say it's like an epiphany moment or anything like that. It was probably the first time I probably gave myself more credit than I deserved, I think. So I got involved with this project here in Idaho, of a large development project. So I guess prior to this, I guess I did start attempting to raise capital actually for you, for a deal you had at the time, which ended up falling through. So it didn't really get anywhere with that.
But I think you did.
This other project was a development project here in Idaho. So it had two things working against it at the time. This was in early 2021. First of all, people were scared of development because prices were going up on all the materials. And two, Southeast Idaho, people knew nothing about Southeast Idaho. They're like, why would I invest in Idaho? It's nothing there. If it's not Boise, it's what is it? So people were just a bit fearful of that. But on that first attempt, honestly, as I came to this team and told them, hey, I'm networking with people like Emma Powell, like people that are other syndicators, investors, I could probably help you raise capital for this deal. And they, of course, let me join in with them and do that. I had honestly mentally limited expectations. I didn't think I could probably do much, but I said, I'm going to at least give it all I can and try the best I can and try my hardest. And so I just started talking to people about it and networking again. People took all the people I already knew that I knew were investing and reached out to all of them, mentioned it. And I think on that first project, I think I maybe raised about 300,000, I think, which honestly, I was not expecting to do more than maybe 50. I was excited and happy that I at least did that and felt good about that. And then since then, I've definitely raised quite a bit more than that at this point now. But I think just that attempt and the success that I had with it, I think was what motivated me more, that to say I can do this. And I did realize, as you said, it's definitely not easy. It's not, at least not where I'm at now. I know there are people out there can just snap their fingers and have 30 million brought to them, the next day. But I'm not that level just yet. So it's still a lot of work, and it's a lot of time on phone calls and a lot of time trying to get creative with marketing. I said I'm trying to do more of attracting capital than raising capital. Right? Like I said, I want people to just see what we're doing and come to us and say, yeah, I want to get involved with that, to spend a lot less time on phone calls and almost feel like you're begging or something. So for me, the main thing is, I guess, first of all, is, like I said, I'm still very much an introvert, so it's not easy for it to reach out and even talk to people. But on top of that, I'm definitely not a salesman. I'm not pushy. If I'm talking to somebody, I know their big thing is you got to get the close, right? You get them built up, then that close. Are you ready to invest? Send your money now. That's not me. That's not my personality or my style. So I just have a conversation with people, tell them what we're doing, and if they're interested, then let them make that decision of their own and have them have their own realization to say, okay, I should be investing in this. So they'll themselves then want to do it, rather than me pushing them and forcing them to do it. So maybe, that's what's been working for me. Again, it's not for everybody, and I maybe could do a lot more if I would be more pushy about it, but that's just not who I am. I just share what I think gets me excited and what really has changed my life, and hope that somebody else would be happy to do the same.
I really hate comparing what we do to sales, but taking that through a sales lens, because mostly what we're doing is finding opportunities and finding people who need those opportunities. But
Yeah.
it does overlap sales a lot. And I think you just demonstrated why introverts are the best salespeople, because you actually listen to what people say, you listen to what their needs are, and then you point them in a direction and say, is this the right direction? And they'll let you know yes or no. And so there's a lot of pushiness in raising capital. And I love the term that you used, attracting capital, because then there's no sales from that. It's just matching people up with opportunities. Well, and that's why I really prefer people reaching out to me versus me reaching out to them, is because I feel like that attraction, they see that there's an opportunity there that they might or might not be interested in. They just want to get more information. And I feel like that's really what we're about here, is just helping people to be able to put their money into something that has above average returns in a safe and stable type of an investment. But at the same time, being able to really listen to people and figure out if you have something that can help them. And if not, you're the kind of guy, just refer them, say, hey, you know what, this guy, you might want to reach out to him. And that's what
Yeah.
makes you good at what you do. People can tell, people can really sense that.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that.
So let's catch us up to today. What are you working on right now?
Yeah, since I've joined Happy Camper Capital a little over a year ago, we currently now have 506C fund. So it is a fund for only accredited investors. But with that fund, we're intending to hold or purchase and hold between 5 to 8 properties within that fund. And of course, the benefit of that, I've talked to many people. Of course, there's some people that are fully on with the fund, some people that don't like a fund, they want to be in individual deals. So it's a thing for everybody. But what for us in this space in particular versus say other commercial real estate, with campgrounds, there is a lot of seasonality to it. No matter where it's at, Florida, New York, Texas, whatever, you got your peak seasons and your off seasons. Even though we're getting great cash flow throughout the year, you're going to have some fluctuations in how much you get and when. There's some people that don't like that. And so we decided with this fund, we can hold multiple properties in the different geographical locations with offsetting peak seasons to stabilize that cash flow throughout the year. So we're getting great returns on all these properties combined, but now you have your northern and southern states, eastern, west, whatever, kind of work together to create that consistency of cash flow throughout the year for those people that are looking for that. And additionally, it reduces some risk. So if we have a property gets hit by, say, a hurricane or a tornado or something, it doesn't just now wipe out your income. All the other properties are still operating and producing income while the other one gets taken care of with the insurance. And so those things combined make it an ideal thing for this particular niche anyway. And just in general, also adds more properties that you can go visit and enjoy.
Have you noticed how the different types of person that tends to prefer choosing each individual investment versus investing in a fund? Because I found that fund level returns definitely rival individual project returns. And if I find an operator that I really like, I want to do multiple investments with that same operator because I trust that they're going to find great properties and they're going to be able to operate those properties. The property is less important to me than the team that is finding and running it. So what type of person would be better suited to choosing each individual investment, and what type of person might be better suited to investing in a fund?
I don't know if I could say what type of person. Me personally, I'm open to either. Like you're saying, for me, it doesn't matter as long as it's producing what I need. That I don't really care. But I know there's been a lot of I'd say the higher net worth people that are institutional investors that prefer to be in an individual property, have more or less, they feel like they have more control, I guess, if it's an individual deal. In the case of a fund, there's some people I guess are concerned that they invest in this fund, then we'll go out and buy whatever. It could be some piece of junk property that doesn't produce, which obviously is not the case. We tell people whether we buy an individual one or for the fund, we still have our strict buying criteria. It has to meet that criteria no matter what. We're not just going to go buy anything because the money's there. And so I think there's people that just are fearful of that I think if you're in a fund, you can just go spend on whatever, not give them the returns that they're expecting. So I don't know if there's an individual type of person that's good for either or, but again, I think they're great for either one's great for anybody. So it just has to go down to their own personal risk tolerance and what they feel they're comfortable with. If they want to be in one individual property and feel they have maybe somewhat more control over that, or can monitor it easier than trying to monitor multiple properties, maybe. I don't really know, but yeah, it's a good question.
I found the more set it and forget it that I get as we go deeper down this path, and I'm feeling that I'm finding more people that I can really trust, the more attractive funds are versus individual deals, because I just have to vet it out one time versus vetting out each and every deal. I can just vet out the team and vet out the fund, and then I can just let it keep rolling. And the diversification is really nice as well. But mostly for me, it's like the time that you take to vet something. Let's say you put $25,000 into an investment. I spend just as much time vetting that as I would if I was putting in $250,000 into an investment. And so I feel like the less due diligence I have to do, the better.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great point too, for sure. Yeah, people that want to be in multiple properties without having to, go through all that analysis each and every time, then yeah, it makes sense to go into a fund for sure.
Now, how does your team identify and find the properties? I especially was interested when you were talking about staggering the peak season. So you have things in a
Mhm.
portfolio that are cash flowing a little bit more consistently year round. What does that look like?
So we have several people on our team that are full-time acquisitions, right? All they're doing is making phone calls, contacting properties, and working out the deals. We set our goal. Basically, we'll say our team members will say, okay, today I want to focus on this region, this state, whatever. And so let's go through. They'll pull up their list of campgrounds in the area, which is pretty easy to access. We use basically open listing sources for campgrounds, and in most cases, the properties we are buying are mom and pop owners and operators, so it's pretty easy to get hold of them when you call up the campground. And so from there, we'll just look at what they have to offer. Of course, we do some analysis at the front end just to see if it's even worth calling, because if it's a tiny one, then no need to even bother calling them. But if at least on initial paper analysis or description of the property, it sounds like this one could work, let's call them up, talk to them, see if they're willing to sell right now and work out a deal. And then, of course, we'll get more into the details of if it is actually going to work for us or not. There's a lot of front-end due diligence analysis that goes into it before we even get to the point of really having an offer to even work with. So yeah, there's a lot of that front-end time and expense of resources of our guys that are doing that to make hundreds of phone calls every week and get down to like the one or two that are willing to even sell. And then from there, get down to the ones that are actually going to work for our criteria. It's a long process to get there, but we know that when we have one, we deliver and bring to our investors, it's going to be like the cream of the crop. We've gone through so much front-end analysis, due diligence, site visits, everything else to know that this is a home run deal for our investors.
I agree. In our club, we really only look at deals that have already been put under contract and have been through due diligence. And so we decide if we want to bring capital to those deals or not. And so we just don't really see anything that's not pretty decent, at least a base hit, because they've already been filtered. I think, though, speaking of the club, we have had a big slowdown raising capital over the last probably 4 to 6 months. And I've heard this again and again about different capital raisers, that the liquidity is starting to dry up. We had a lot of cash sloshing around for a while, not just because of the stimulus payments, but also because we had all these baby boomers in the most wealthy decade of their lives. And now they're starting to retire. And we Gen Xers who are replacing them, there just aren't as many of us. And so I'm noticing that liquidity markets are drying up. So you throw in some uncertainty in there with the economy and interest rates, and all of a sudden it becomes much, much more difficult to raise capital. Have you seen it trending towards that direction? And what would you say to people who are feeling a little bit uncertain right now about placing their capital into some investments?
Right. Yeah, definitely. I'd say about mid-December, we saw almost like it was a hard shut off. Like it just all of a sudden the flow stopped and we did not have any investment come into our fund for, I'd say, at least a month and a half, right till the end of January. We finally started getting a little bit more to trickle in, and it's starting to pick up a little bit again now. But I think a lot of that had to do with, first of all, the end of the year, I've been told, is difficult anyway. It's holidays and family gatherings makes it, people don't have time to look into stuff. So they kind of put it off until the beginning of the year. But I actually put out a poll recently on LinkedIn, just in general, what's the deal? I guess what's people's concerns is that they're afraid that prices are going to fall, if interest rates are going to fall. They just want to hold liquidity for different reasons. In fact, I had an investor that had committed capital to us back in maybe end of November, who was planning to, he was selling a property and was going to take all of that liquidity and put it back into the fund. But when it came time for that, he decided to hold off and wait because he had some other cryptocurrency things that weren't doing so good.
Oh.
He was in another multifamily deal that was doing capital call. So he kind of wanted to hold on to some liquidity and just wait and see, just in case he needed the money for something else, and then maybe come back at the end of Q1. And if everything's good, then he'd come back in. So that was kind of one of those things. Okay, so people are concerned about what's happening. And so on this poll I did, though, the number one response for those that responded was that they think that the prices are going to come down, right? As people are starting to buy less, therefore the demand is going down somewhat, so therefore prices can come down, maybe in correlation with the higher interest rates as well. And so people are afraid of investing in something that's going to go down in value, I think is what it is. And so for us, of course, what I help tell people that these campgrounds we're buying are pretty much exclusively we buy off market. With rare exception do we buy from a broker. We are getting them well under market value anyway, so there's no even need to concern about values coming down. And then of course we still do our value add process to increase that value anyway and increase the income on the property. So there should be really no concern for that, at least in our niche and space. I have noticed in other real estate, especially in the last couple of years, there was so much competition that pretty much everybody was overbidding everybody else just to get deal, even though I wouldn't consider it a deal at that point if you've overpaid for it and you have very limited slim returns. That's very high risk to me for low reward, but I could see people being concerned about that. And some of those people are going through it now. I think if they've seen that their plans are not working out because they overpaid and the interest rates are higher now, so they can't get the refinance they were planning on doing. It can affect, and people are in those deals, I think, are the ones that are maybe more affected by that and maybe are having some second thoughts about getting into something else again. But again, for us, that's not even a concern for what we deal with, just in this niche and the types of properties we buy anyway. But yeah, there definitely is that concern, though, for people that are just fearful of what's to come, fearful of a recession, how it's going to affect things, if it's going to cause markets to collapse or whatever it may be. So a lot of people are just holding on to cash for liquidity just in case for emergencies or something.
Yeah, we hear during times like this that cash is king. And I always look at cash as king from an emergency standpoint. You need to get a property out from some problem where it's not making money and you need to be able to pay that mortgage so you can stave off the worst. That property cannot get taken away by the bank. And that's when cash is king. But cash is also king because during times like these, when we're starting to see more opportunities pop up and prices are starting to normalize, it's nice to be able to have some cash so you can take advantage of those opportunities. And I think when people hear cash is king, sometimes they forget that it's not just for an emergency fund. Cash is also king so that you can go out there and take action when the deals are starting to look like they're lying around. When you are buying low, selling high, sometimes it's scary to buy low. And that sounds ridiculous. Everybody wants to buy low, right? But what are the times that you buy low? It's during downturns. And so that bravery and that experience of being able to look at something that's priced low and say, hey, now's the time to buy. Cash is king for this reason. That's, I think, the message that is really important for people to hear, that if you want to sell high, it's really helpful to be able to buy low.
Yeah, definitely.
Don, tell me what you are up to next. I know you've had a lot of huge changes just in the couple of years that we've known one another, where the first time we talked and you had done some impressive deals, but at the time I don't think you realized, like I said, that it was impressive. And then you went on and basically joined Happy Camper Capital. Wow, that's a mouthful right there. Let's say that 5 times fast. And you joined in and you've really gotten active on social media. You really put yourself out there so that you attract capital rather than having to chase capital. And you've recently left your W-2. And I know when we left our W-2, it was like the goal that we had been reaching for so many years was suddenly just in our laps because he got laid off. So he came home and he said, I'm done. That's it. And I said, okay, I guess we just hit that goal. It felt so anticlimactic almost. And then we had to really spend some time looking at, okay, what's next? Like, are we actually ready to retire? Should you get another job? What's the next goal after this? Are we going to do this? Are we going to do that? As being left at a little bit of loose ends and having to refigure out what the next phase of our lives is going to look like. And I hear that's very common for people who leave the job, retire early, and you'll start their own business. So what do the next couple of years look like for you? What are your new goals?
New goals, huh? So I guess initially, we bought that first property, that four-plex, 5.5 years ago now. I actually gave myself a 5-year goal. I said within 5 years, I want to be able to leave my job. After the first maybe 2 or 3 years, I didn't think I was going to actually make that happen, but I'm happy to say that it did happen. And that came from taking those risks early on and investing in these development projects, and of course with Happy Camper Capital getting higher cash flows. And so for me, it came down to I was scared. It's a scary thing to let go of basically guaranteed income, but at the same time, I was getting so busy doing so much with Happy Camper Capital and going on podcasts and things. I was like, I just felt like my job was getting in the way of my progress, of the things I could do. We'll say if your kids watch Ninjago, right? My true potential is being limited because of these hours that I have to work. It came to a point where I was like, I've got to let the job go before eventually they'd probably fire me because I'm not doing my job. So I came down and said, my wife and I put together plans. Okay, if I'm going to do this, we need a few things to happen first. Like I have to have these like check boxes done. Part of that was having built up, we'll say a savings account, I guess, like an emergency fund or something, enough to cover our expenses for up to 1 year, just in case if worst case things happens and nobody's investing anymore, we can at least cover our minimum expenses for up to a year to allow us time to get through that and keep working on everything we're doing. And then of course, worst case scenarios, if nothing else, I can just go get another job. So for us, it was those things had to happen. And for me, luckily, because of one of those development projects I was in earlier that ended up paying out, came to happen around that time, I was able to put that money into a savings account and say, okay, we're not going to touch this. This is not for investing. This is for emergencies and for our living expenses to get us through. And that for me was probably the biggest help to reduce, I guess, remove that fear and of am I going to be able to do this? So, okay, I've got something we can live off. We're going to be okay for a time at least. And so, yeah, so I was like, as soon as literally the day that money hit the bank is the day that I told my employer, hey, I've been quitting. I had to wait for that to hit there first just to be sure. And once it was in, then that was it. I had planned to give them a lot more warnings. I was at that job for almost 20 years. And so I wanted to give them at least a month warning, but because of the timing it took for that all to happen, it ended up being about 2 weeks. But I was like, hey, either way, 2 weeks notice, I'm leaving the end of the year. I figured it'd be a clean cut at the end of the year rather than extend on beyond that. And then, of course, as we hinted on, it was almost did get a bit worried because, as you said, the money dried up. People weren't investing, and I was like, man, is this? Hopefully, this will stop at some point. But I'm still confident that we'll turn back to, we'll say, somewhat normal. People will start investing again. But with that, I've also been trying to focus on high net worth or institutional level investors, family offices, private equity, groups like that aren't afraid to still invest right now to help fill in the gap in the meantime and make sure we still get deals done, which people then will see, right, we're still doing deals. They will be attracted to come back and invest with us. So I'm kind of working on all those aspects. But my long-term goal now, so again, 5 years ago, I put the goal to leave my job, and I've effectively done that. But I'm still working, right? I didn't just now retired on a beach and doing nothing. I don't think I'm ever the type to just do nothing. I need to always be active doing something. And but for now, so I didn't take any, kind of one hand regretted. I was like, I should have taken a week off or something to just enjoy doing nothing for a bit. But I went immediately right back to work, right? We were trying to close this huge deal. We had it in Ohio at the time. And unfortunately, we didn't get that deal done, but I was full focused on doing that. But my goal now essentially is the next, I'd say 5 years or so, I want to be, I'd say, fully retired, right? Be completely passive, no active investing at all. Just be a fully passive investor. Continue that as these funds and wealth continues to grow and build on these deals I'm with, the development stuff and Happy Camper. I'm just going to keep recycling that, reinvesting that, letting it keep building and keep creating more income, more cash flows as those numbers go up. So that way, in the next 5 years, we can just spend our time doing what we enjoy doing, which would include a lot of travel. We want to travel the world, of course, and do a lot of that, which we do some of that now to a certain degree, but just do a lot more. And of course, the biggest thing is just giving our time in service. Like, we want to be able to serve and help people in our community and around the world. My wife's home country, do a lot of things down there to help the people there, and I'll probably set up some type of charity or something like that to do more, give back more. And we don't ever intend to be the point where we're living this life of luxury and in a huge mansion and Rolls Royce and stuff like that. That's not my dream. We just wanted to have a normal, typical standard of living with the average stuff, but take all that extra income and give it all away. That's for us.
Yeah, if you want to give back, you have to give up first. And you definitely are a good example of that already in your life. And having that clear focus that you don't know maybe exactly what it's going to look like, but you know that it's going to happen, and being able to just sit back and think to yourself, like, how can I help people today? And that really is a hallmark that describes you. So it sounds like a beautiful, not retirement, because the world needs more people like you who can't sit still, because after you don't have to worry about money anymore, not that you're not watching over your portfolio. We'll be doing that the rest of our lives, right? But you get to the point where you don't have to think about it all the time, and it's not the main focus of your life. You take that same energy and then you push that into spending time with your loved ones and just helping other people and making the world a better place.
Yeah, I agree.
Don, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. I want to ask you how people can get in touch with you after the show, and more importantly, why should they get in touch with you after the show? I know from our story that when you reached out to me after a podcast, that's why we do these podcasts, and that's how you and I even met, and that's when you really started reaching out to so many people as you possibly could, and that's when you really accelerated your journey. So how could people reach out to you, and why should they reach out to you?
Yeah, going back on what you just said there, me being active on LinkedIn, I think, was in direct relation to connecting with you, right? Because you were the one that said, hey, there's this stuff happening on LinkedIn. There's these meetups events to come to. So I did not know anything about these meetup events. I didn't know what was happening on LinkedIn. That was all, I think, thanks to you that you kind of pulled me into that group and crowd. So
I did not know that.
So you can find me obviously on LinkedIn, as you mentioned. I'm very active there now, and you can definitely find me at happycampercapital.com. Go there, if you find the About Us tab at the top, you can find my name, and right there on that page, you can schedule a call to talk with me directly, and schedule a Zoom call or a phone call or whatever. Just talk about whatever I can do to help you to change your life, I guess. As real estate has changed my life, I definitely can say that it can change your life. I've gone from a negative net worth, lots of debt, to effectively my net worth is now over $1 million, all because of real estate in the last 5 years. It can be life-changing, and so I definitely encourage anybody that is in a similar situation, that maybe not sure what to do next, if they know they want to change something and start investing and start creating that passive income. I'd love to talk to anybody that's looking to do that. And of course, anybody looking to invest as well and start creating that passive income now, I always have to talk to you.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. It's all about helping people. And if investing in one of our projects is something that will help people, that's fantastic. But at the same time, just putting seeds out there And because we need help from other people and we can help other people, and just the bigger the network is, the more that we're going to get done. That's what makes this industry go around, really. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing, Don. I really appreciate you being on the show. Your story is truly inspiring. Like I said, in a lot of ways, it mirrors the things that we've been going through. And I think that we both prove that regular old people can take this journey, and in a relatively short period of time, it's not get rich
Yeah.
quick, but it's relatively short period of time, 5 to 10 years, can really make a generational impact on our wealth building and our ability to give back. So thank you for showing that and sharing that with us today.
Sure.
I don't know of a story that can convince you that pretty much any regular person can do this than Don's story. Then I don't know, because that's exactly what we were able to do. We were able to just go from being regular people, stay-at-home mom, soccer mom, and into real estate, and basically change our lives completely in a matter of just a couple of years. I know that this industry of passive income can tend to be very, very filled with scams. Like, you're going to buy some sort of a course and we're going to do your online business all for you. And next thing you know, you're just on a beach in Mexico and you don't have to worry about anything else. And that's just not how it is. And so our goal here is to just show real people going down this path and showing how it's actually done. There's nothing to buy. There's nobody who can do it for you. It's just about working hard, making some money, investing that money wisely, and then letting that money pay you back with its new friends for years and years to come. And thank you for joining us on the Passive Income Adventures. Please reach out to Don after the show. Check out the offerings that Happy Camper Capital has. They have some great deals. I would love to connect with you as well on my website at www.highrise.group/contact. I have links to all my socials there, a link to book an appointment on my calendar, and some investments that you can check out to see if they are a good fit for you. There are lots of places where you could be investing your capital so that you can start working on your next passive income adventure. There are a lot of places that you could invest your capital. We'd like to be one of them so that you can get started on your next passive income adventure. Thank you for joining us.